All right. Well, let's get back into some of these clips that Andrew Cuomo apparently has no idea about. This is another Buffalo just seems out of control. I mean, here is a scene. He is being interviewed by the press. This guy, his hands are up. He's about, I don't know, I can't tell the distance. Maybe it's 30 yards away from the police line. Let's watch this.
My name is Miles Carter. I live in the town of Tonawanda. I don't live in the city of Buffalo. My mosque is over on Genesee Street.
And here you can see it from a distance. Same scene. See him being interviewed, and all of a sudden they just come and grab him, tackle him. And they're just sitting there with the big batons. They bring in the dog.
Welcome to democracy in America.
And they're doing this. The guy's being interviewed by the local news. They don't care. And the reason why they don't care that it's on video, they don't care that it's on the local news, is because there is literally no one in the country now who is going to hold them to account. The governor has signaled that he doesn't care. There's not going to be any civil rights division of the DOJ coming in with any type of consent decree or investigation. There's no accounting. And here's the weird part. And I'm curious is the one pushback that Donald Trump got this week was from the military. We saw Mattis. We saw, and I want to make this clear. As far as I'm concerned, they can all screw themselves. But it is interesting that as soon as he brings up the Insurrection Act, Mattis, Kelly, maybe a couple others, these are retired military, because the active military cannot speak. The retired military comes out there. They're carrying the active military's message. And then Espers comes up and pretends that he didn't know what was going on when they were walking to the a church. And he comes out and he says, no Insurrection Act. And it's basically like, it's almost that much more dangerous that the military was the one to put at least some brakes on this, right? From metastasizing. Like that, the vacuum that is created when the opposition party, and one that holds substantial power, like you said, Shahid, is not even, that we have to wait for the military. That's bad.
It's incredibly dangerous when we have to. And on the one hand, I'm grateful that we have professionalization in the military enough to resist those orders. But the question then becomes, how far down the ranks does that professionalization go? When you're given the illegal order, do you resist it? Apparently not, because cops around the country and military police around the country and National Guard units are disobeying or are obeying illegal orders. It is illegal to walk up to a peaceful person, shove them to the ground, and crack their skull on the sidewalk. It is a further violation of care to step over that person while they bleed out on the sidewalk. There was a point you raised before. I just want to touch on this because it implicates here the conscience of individuals you were kind of describing as a crucial piece here. And when you watch that clip, the first one that you showed of the elderly man in Buffalo who got pushed down, the cop who pushes him, you can see very briefly pause and duck down. He can tell that something is wrong. And his individual conscience says, holy shit, what did I just do here?
Yep.
And you see, the commanding officer or these other ones, they're like, move along. There's nothing to see here. Even if a cop has an individual conscience, that's not enough, because there's an institutional command authority that reinforces disregard for human dignity and disregard for lives. And that's exactly what's unacceptable here. I'm really curious to hear what Jamie, has to say.
Why, thank you. So yeah, you're absolutely right about this institutional disregard for life. I don't believe it's just a few bad apples doing these things. And, I can see where people are coming from when they're like, we need to hold these cops accountable. But that kind of framework also says that the problem is not systemic. As long as we can punish these few cops who do these things, it will act as a deterrent to other cops doing them. And I haven't seen a ton of evidence for that. And it reinforces the idea that our system provides justice when it doesn't, right?
Shahid, what is your opinion on that? I mean, I think there is actually some data that shows that, like, if we have narrow parameters and cops cross those parameters, and they are subject to actual civil and, in instances, criminal punishment. If there is like some sense of actual accountability, the idea isn't just for the individual, but the idea is that, like, everybody gets the message, like, I don't want to go to jail. I'm not allowed to do this.
Right.
And I feel like they're walking around saying, like, I am allowed to do this. I mean, is it your sense that
right.
would have an impact?
Individual accountability is a piece of institutional accountability. I would describe it as necessary but insufficient. So Jamie's absolutely right that it's not enough. And I think also, Sam, you're right that it's not sufficient. You need to have individual accountability and institutional accountability. And one part here, just to unite those two frames, you can't have individual accountability until you have institutional limits. And that's exactly why the opposition party, I think, needs to be replaced, because we've seen Democrats engineer a policy framework that has no limits. Right? Once you have qualified immunity, cops can get away with doing anything they want, particularly when you have prosecutors who defer to the police departments that they oversee. And that's one of the problematic patterns here. You know, in so many places, even if a cop does murder someone, even on video, like Eric Garner or George Floyd, you have local prosecutors, or, Ahmaud Arbery comes to mind here. We have local prosecutors who just, could not be bothered, where prosecutors construe their mission as persecuting the community, not holding police accountable for their violations of the law. And to that extent, you might perceive, the policing, prison, prosecution apparatus to some extent, resembles an organized crime syndicate. And that's why we have legislatures to pass laws to keep us safe from the executive branch. And it's exactly, the locus, I think, of the failure of both our policymakers, in the legislatures writ large, and particularly the leadership of the Democratic Party, because they haven't shown up for that work. That's why they're there, to guard we the people from the excesses of our government. That's why the Constitution was written. And they swear oaths of office to defend it, but they seem, to your point before, not so the tools in the shed being less sharp than we might hope. I think too many of them don't even understand what the thing is that they swear an oath to. And part of the reason there, I think we select members of Congress not based on their acumen, not based on their demonstrations of commitment to our communities. We select them based on how much money they can raise. And that's a really bad criterion to use to choose people to make the law.
Right. Well, all right. And